So I'm going to introduce our speaker today. I'm Dr. Ira Kirschenbaum. I am the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Orthopedic Experience and Innovation. I'm also the chairman of Orthopaedics at Bronx Care Health System in the South Bronx, New York. But tonight we have a great pleasure of having Brian Cunnigham today to talk about a very popular article and to get some feedback from a number of people and get some discussion going about the idea of transitioning to practice in residency. So, Brian, just introduce yourself. What do you do? Where you come from, and so everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ira. So, Brian Cunningham, orthopedic trauma surgeon by trade. I did my fellowship at UCSF with Ted McLeod and the group out there. My current practice is in Minneapolis, Minnesota with Health Partners and Tria Orthopaedics. I'm the vice chair for inpatient orthopedics, and I do a fair amount of research and administrative work along with my orthopedic trauma practice. I've been there about 5 years and been really excited, tightly working with the university, but not officially a role.
That's great. That's great. So, I just had to let somebody in, sorry. So this article was very popular and got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of emails about it, about what about the topic. What exactly drove you to look into this issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, being fairly close to residency and fellowship, relatively speaking, I was somewhat astounded starting out how little I knew and how little I was prepared to transition from residency and fellowship to practice, whether it's a private setting, which I saw a lot of as a resident, or a academic setting or a health system setting. And I just thought, do all residents feel like this, or is it just me? And so we set out to try to better understand, number one, are residents interested in being, prepared in a different way? I don't want to say better prepared, but prepared in a different way to transition to practice. And if they are they getting some of that along the way? I mean, we would never let a resident come out who, didn't understand where the radial nerve was or didn't understand basic anatomy of an approach to the hip. But we're very comfortable with residents going out into practice that have no idea how to practice, I'll call it the business of medicine, or understand the economics or the politics or the complex environment that they're getting dropped into. And it's so hard to operate just at baseline when you start out, let alone figure out all this other stuff. So that's really kind of the story of how this project grew out.
It's great. I mean, I liken it to sort of like riding a horse, and you're in Bozeman, Montana right now.
Yeah.
So I'll use a non-Bronx analogy. I'll use a
Perfect.
Montana analogy. It would be like knowing how to ride a horse, but not knowing the terrain.
Correct. Or how to steer it, maybe.
Or
yeah,
how to steer
exactly.
it, or how to deal with what's going on. And, because so much of your life is outside of that exam room.
Yep.
With the patient, that is a make or break to your happiness. I mean, what do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. I think we all hear the stat, like, what is it? 50% of people change jobs in the first 2 years or something like that. And I think, we just do a disservice, I think, to our, and this isn't assigning blame, but I just think we don't focus on preparing our residents and fellows to succeed in practice outside of a lot of the technical aspects of surgery or decision making or judgment. And it's a big gap that we have that we could just do so much better if we got away from this idea that business and money and medicine can never intermingle or touch. It's like a 5-year-old with a plate of food. You can't have anything touching, otherwise they won't eat it. Like, we've gotten so rigid about this idea that's altruistic but a little bit antiquated, in my opinion. Like, the first day you start practice, money becomes a part of your life, and money, how people get paid, how insurance gets paid, how your hospital gets paid, how you get paid, how your practice gets paid, overhead. passive income, like all these things rush at you. And most of us are like, what?
Yep.
You know, you're just hoping for a senior partner or somebody to take pity on you and give you a few tidbits here and there, but you're not really prepared.
Well, I find not only on the business side, but we're doing the patients a possible disservice by not knowing how to run the flow in our clinics,
Absolutely.
or not
Absolutely.
knowing. I mean, you go out, you don't even know that you need to call a patient back with the MRI report, or how to do
Absolutely.
it,
Yep.
or how to explain a disease to a patient, or just that's part of practice too.
Absolutely. How do you decide your clinic template day one?
Right, your clinic template. Right.
I mean, you hopefully you ask somebody, you just say, I'll take yours. Like, but you
Right.
don't really know what you're doing. You have no plan.
What is the system-based practice?
Yeah. So, we struggled a lot with, I had all kinds of great questions that I just made up and I thought they were going to be so fantastic. And they might have been, but the thing we got to was, is there some structure in place already that is, in our opinion, was kind of trying to meet this need? And so the ACGME has their 6 buckets of things that you're supposed to learn about.
Mm-hmm.
Systems-based practice is one that we felt like we could pull aspects of that out into a survey and try to capture something that is being done or attempted to be done today, and maybe
Right.
say, is there a way that we can use this to grow into a little bit better form, essentially.
Right. So I'm gonna share my screen for a second, and I'm gonna show the article. This is the article. I particularly like the graphic we chose for your article. I just think that worked out pretty well. But besides the introduction, I want to go here. Okay. And tell me in your findings of the article, where you talked about close to 91% felt they had a poor understanding. Was that a surprise when you found that 91% of the residents you surveyed?
It was because, we really attempted to bucket residents into a younger group and a more senior group.
Uh-huh.
And so our initial hypothesis was, functionally, some of the residents are picking this up along the way. The more senior you get, the more you kind of understand. And, that was probably one of the most surprising findings, is that basically nobody feels like they're ready and have a systematic approach for learning this stuff in their home institution.
Wow. Now I'm gonna do a new share right now, and we're gonna take a look at, these are the places you looked at, right?
Yep, that's the group.
This is in a lot of ways a who's who of superb residencies.
Absolutely. So that was one of the things that we were really focused on, is we didn't want to be boohooed because it was programs people hadn't heard of, and we didn't want to be biased of just Midwest shops or a couple places. So it's not perfect, but there's places from just about anywhere that you can think of. We left out New York. My apologies. But yeah, we tried to get a pretty wide swath, so that things could be somewhat generalizable. Now, look, the capture rate on these voluntary things is always tough. So you're never going to get whole residencies of 40, 50, 60 people to fill them out. But we do have some input from a variety of different people.
It's interesting. So I'm going to go back to the other one, and let's go down to transition to practice. Okay, where you talked about their level of interest versus their level of knowledge. To explain that to me a little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, one of the other hypotheses that we had was there was going to be aspects of this that resident interest would change over time. So, if you're an intern or a second year resident, you're trying to figure out how to stay awake, how to put on a splint, how to get to the cafeteria. You just have a different perspective. As you get through fellowship, you start to become a chief. You got a feel for kind of where you're going to go and what you're going to do. You can start to see the other side. And so we felt like, we wanted to make sure that we could quantify the level of interest that people had, because we also felt like if people weren't interested, it was going to be easy to say, well, they didn't learn it because they weren't interested. But what we found is that the closer you got to graduation, the more you realized, holy smokes, I don't know this, and I really need to know this.
Right. So this one shows senior residents showed a significantly lower interest versus junior residents incorporating topics of job searching, contract negotiations, contract law. We have some residents on the in the audience today, and they may have some questions about this. I would have think the senior residents would.
Right, agreed. That's one of the surprising things that we found. It was almost like people either didn't know they were ready, or were looking for answers in fellowship, or what. But you would think the person who's kind of working hard as a junior resident is the person who's taking away other thoughts. And really, they want to know they want to know what practice looks like.
Right. And let's look at this other section, professional development, which I think is, to me, one of the most important aspects of your career. Because when you finish your residency or fellowship, you don't stop learning. The really great surgeons continue to develop professionally, right?
Right.
And basically, the interest in learning was about in the 40s to 50s, right? Yep.
Yeah, that's for leadership and development. The interesting thing is
also leadership and development. Sorry, professional development here. Right. Low senior residents showed a lower interest in junior residents.
Same thing, which is just, to me, just phenomenal. Like I don't know if senior residents feel like they got it kind of sorted, or they feel like they're not sure what's going on. But it's a fascinating development, because if you look at the actual raw scores and the questions, the senior residents didn't necessarily feel like they understood things better. They just were less interested in learning them at that point, which I can't understand. I can't make sense of that.
Maybe they just figured they just went through 3 or 4 years of or 5 years of intensive orthopedics. Now they're studying for the boards, and they're thinking their whole job is going to be about, I'm going to be in the OR all day.
Exactly. And I think that is true. I think that's one of the big misconceptions that we have, is that you feel like, how do I say this more articulately? You don't even know what you don't know. That's part of the challenge, is you don't even know that you don't know what you're doing. And then you get dropped into this, Shark Tank, and you wake up and say, holy smokes, I don't know how to run my practice. I don't know how to get referrals. We all come from these incredibly curated fellowship practices that are literally like the most beautifully run. They've got, decades of referral bases. Sometimes they have efficiencies, they have operative rooms, whether it's swing rooms or overlapping surgery. They've got fellows. It's just like, you're watching somebody conduct an orchestra. You land in your first job. Not only are you not conducting, there's not even anyone to play. There's no instruments. And they're just looking at you like, what's the plan? And you're like, I'm not ready for this.
Well, it's very interesting. When I went to the Rothman Institute for my fellowship, I am a bit older than I was yesterday. And I was there in 1990 to 91. Dick Rothman was only 53. Bob Booth was 46. And Bill Hozak was 40, I think, or 38 to 40. If that. I don't even know if Bill was shaving yet. I'm not really sure. But one thing I know I kept my eye on when I was there was watching how they ran the Rothman Institute. And no matter how much I did that, my first 6 months in the OR, when I went back to New York to practice, was like, I am not in Kansas anymore. You know, like first of all, you get the resistance. We don't do it that way.
Yep.
So you got to learn. You got to learn how to navigate and manipulate from a leadership point of view. If you're going to be the leader in the OR, you got to learn how to influence people, right?
Absolutely. And you know, creating change is one of the areas that I spend a lot of time administratively. Is how do you get people to move with you and get people on
Yep.
board and kind of shift culture? And you know, you've done it beautifully out there in New York, and I think it's one of the things that residents and fellows aren't prepared for, because all they've ever been in is a really well-oiled machine for the most
Yep.
part. And so they've never had to think, well, how do I get somebody to kind of come on board with what I'm doing? And you know, just a shout out to the University of Minnesota and Ann Van Heest and the crew out here. You know, we piloted this project with them and their residents, and after seeing the results, they implemented like a longitudinal course trajectory where they basically started to try to pick up some of these pieces and some of these openings and say, how do we do a better job of this? And I think we've talked about going back and trying to capture the residents again after this has been in place. But I think, you know, that's maybe part of what we can do is start to prepare people for these challenges, right? Creating change, change management, however you want to say it. Yeah, because like you said earlier, Ira, it's not about, you know, it's not all about money necessarily. It's about understanding what's going on, having a seat at the table, being aware rather than having to, you know, hit every flagpole on the way down. You can go around some, might be helpful.
You know, you talked earlier about, I made reference to the Donald Rumsfeld line. You know, there's the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns, you know?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I believe, and I, you know, read through your whole discussion and conclusions, and we're going to get in a few minutes to how can we solve this?
Yeah.
And then ask the audience any advice from their experience how to solve it. But I even question whether or not many of the residencies have the firepower or the knowledge to teach this stuff.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think, you know, I would even like go one step further, and I would say, I'm not sure how many attendings around the country have had an experience that's uncomfortable enough that they could go back and say, okay, here's what I did, here's how I failed, here's my situation, my challenge. Right. If you come up through the same system, you go to fellowship and you get dropped back in the same system, you don't go through the same challenges and changes that you do if you get dropped into a system that's different or into a private practice, because you're just going back into this environment that you know so well and they know you. And you know, I think a lot of residents and fellows go back home, quote unquote, either to stay at fellowship or come back to residency or some version of that. But when you really have to kind of go out there on your own and try to sort through some of this stuff, it's a very humbling experience. And I think, yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, but I think there's some fun ideas on things we could do.
Well, you know, first of all, I also want to mention to the audience that if you have a question, you can put it in a chat, or you could just talk and say, hey, I have a question. Chat's always a good place. Then I'll call on you to answer your question. Let's talk about some solutions to this. Okay. I'll tell you a solution that I hate, that I believe that some people have proposed, that the Residency Review Committee or the ACGME or the orthopedic part of ACGME mandates that certain things be taught. Okay. Now, again, the problem I have with that is competencies of the people at all the, what are there, 100 programs now, 80 to 100?
Yeah, a ton.
Yeah. And that may not be a great idea. So what would be your idea of how to bring system-based practice education, which includes also, like you brought up in the article, teaching people how to be researchers?
Right. Right.
how to write an article, even if you're in practice, it's, we find at JOEI that we were getting a lot of practitioners who are, giving us articles that aren't of the same writing quality
Yep.
of the academic,
Yep.
but great ideas and great
Right.
research. So what would be your idea on how to solve the issue which you brought up, which was 90% feel they don't know system-based practice?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I'll just put in a plug as a newly minted member of the AOA. I would love to hear some of those folks chime in, kind of professional educators that are in this space full time. I tend to side with you, Ira. I'm not a huge fan of the quote unquote competencies. I think it turns into a little bit of a checkbox that you feel like you have to get through, and I'm not really sure how much change it creates. So I think one of the unique aspects of this kind of subset of education is that, one, I don't think there's a lot of people that are interested in it. It's a little bit uncomfortable. It's ambiguous. It gets into the intersection between, mental health, work-life balance, finance, industry relationships, like a lot of the kind of sticky parts that aren't cut and dry, like where's the radial nerve? And so one of the things I've thought of is if we can kind of all agree, maybe there's not a core group of faculty at every university or every program setting, then why not think outside the box and get a group of people that are interested in this, that are willing to, everyone does Zoom lectures now, have a quarterly systems-based practice or preparation for practice that it's open to everybody in the country can log on their grand rounds day, and or they can watch it recorded or whatever, and have some alternate kind of innovative way to help provide this education without forcing a group that's either not comfortable or not available or interested to provide that education for the residents.
I think it's a great idea. I know Michael asked from Hospital for Special Surgery, which is a small community hospital.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it.
Just south of my hospital in the Bronx. Michael asked has run a business course for residents at, I believe, at the Academy, which I think is incredibly well received. But it's not enough. It's not enough. When I took over as chairman, I felt that I was in some leadership positions before, but I actually went, Harvard Business School has executive education in healthcare management called Managing Healthcare Delivery. And it's a 9-month course, 3 weeks on campus. And that's a luxury you can't take sometimes.
Right.
A week off, 4 months distance learning, a week off, 4 months distance learning, then another week off. But I think the AOA, for example, or an organization like that, could put together a series of repetitive and ongoing courses that are available that cover the topics at hand. And in this day and age with, Zoom, YouTube, and everything else, they could be, recorded and people could show them at grand rounds when they want and incorporate it. I mean, just for example, when I was a resident, we did not have a biomechanics department at our residency. But biomechanics, you had to learn.
Right.
So actually, the biomechanics team from special surgery, Tim Wright and all those guys, they came up, and I think they were hired to teach us biomechanics.
That's awesome.
Because instead of one of our attendings saying, "All right, I'll get a book and I'll read it,"
exactly.
We need professionals to develop the courses, and I think that's right. So I think that's one way to do it. Where do you think the role of the Academy is in this?
It's a great question. I was actually talking to the guys at Dell, Kevin and Carl, about this recently. I think the Academy is having been like a junior member in the academy, I say this with some hesitation, but I think the academy has an opportunity to kind of reach back to the younger members of the academy, the 0 to 5 year range, 0 to 10 year young practitioner, and put together something to help address, that it's not going to get you ready for the transition to practice, but it might help you in the transition, in practice, in that first bucket of time. At the OTA, we do kind of like a young practitioners forum. And I think there's some things, as you mentioned earlier, Ira, there's some things you just aren't going to know you need to know more about until you suffer a little bit in practice and hit some bumps. And those things, I think, is where the academy really has an opportunity. You have such a diverse group in the academy, people from hardcore legacy private practices, single practitioners, the most ivory tower academic centers, to big health systems, to small health systems. And I think that diversity is really powerful when it comes to this, because not everybody's going to take a private job or a big job or a small job or an academic job. But if you leverage the power of 26,000, whatever it is, members, you can start to pair up people. Okay, this is somebody who's in a similar role or gone through a similar setting or challenge, and you can start to get some, I think, some great feedback and information, rather than just the next ICL on, I don't know what,
on
balancing a total knee.
on difficult total knees.
Yeah.
If I see, I recently got out of the operating room, and after 32 years of operating, and I have bilateral total knee replacements, and and I have to say that even when I was really at the height of my practice, if I saw another ICLS on how to handle a difficult primary knee replacement, every year the same. I've got to be honest, every year the same thing, and I'm going like, either a whole bunch of people are still going to it, or they're hiring people to go to it. One thing I think is kind of fascinating. I wanted your thoughts on this. Derek Moore, who's just a brilliant guy, has put together Orthobullets.
Right.
Okay, which early to him was Chris Wheelis in the Wheelis textbook, which was, I think, the first.
The first, for sure.
Into wiki orthopedic knowledge. We don't have, for system-based practice, which is so important, an Orthobullets.
Right, it doesn't exist.
Or a Wheelis, Chris Wheelis, a Wheelis textbook. Yep. In fact, you can't even Google search this stuff.
No.
Right?
You can't. Yeah, it's true. It's 100% true. It's
how do I do, if you went onto Google right now and said, how do I make a good template for my patients in the office? Nothing.
Won't even come up. It won't even come up. Yeah. Exactly.
It'll say Microsoft templates for free. Download here. Exactly. After you give us your name, social security number, and bank account and password.
That's right. Well, after today, the first hit is going to be this journal club.
Yeah, it'll be it. Yeah. So I think that's why I said we need to have in system-based practice for our residents and for young surgeons 0 to 5. We need to have a group of people like maybe Michael asked. I don't want to sign Mike up to yet another project, but like minds get together. Even Derek Moore, who really knows how to do this, and put it together. Maybe even put it together on Orthobullets. This may be an idea for Orthobullets to do it. Although it's not for the there's no test studying.
Right.
But we need a place where you could ask a question like, can I own my own physical therapy in my state?
Yep. Exactly.
And that should be easily available instead of you having to pay $500 an hour to a lawyer.
Yep.
To get that question, or what's the best way to handle phone calls in my practice?
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think that would be a very big, big way to do it. We have one question that came in from the chat area was, how long do you think it would take somebody to get a basic understanding of this system-based practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, I've kind of morphed this system-based practice into everything I wish I would have known before I started practice that's outside of anatomy and surgical approaches. But I think, the hard part is, I think if you suffer on your own, it takes a long time. If you just have to make every mistake, right? If you have to be, what my good friend at Seattle, Chris Kwan, told me, he said, you don't have to be a first person learner. You don't have to make every mistake. You can ask a few people, you can get a few shortcuts. You don't have to bump into every post. You get somebody or some group of people that can collectively kind of, do some intellectual sync and get a bunch of different experiences together. I think you can easily you can't get everything figured out, but you can get light years ahead of where we're at right now. I mean, I just think in some ways the bar is so low. Like when you join a practice and a referral comes in, who gets the referral? How is that determined? What if they have good insurance? What if they have bad insurance? How is that? I mean, there are just so many small basic things. How does the hospital get paid for your total hip if you're doing it in the hospital?
Right. Or
how do they know?
Yeah, or when you're an attending and an employed by a hospital and you're the Department of Orthopedics, how do you know people who call the call center asking for you go to you?
Exactly. It's
how do you even know to ask that question?
Right. That's the thing that you need. It's a set of knowledge that you don't, as a resident, you don't know that you need to have, and it's a group of people that I think are interested in it and want to teach it that aren't at maybe like the classic academic setting.
Right.
And how do you kind of put that in a package that it can be distributed? I think would be a great service to our young surgeons.
Yeah. I think also that it starts with a lot of questions.
Yeah.
If I had to do it, I'd get you like Mike asked, Vindasa, who's interested in this, Craig McAllister out in Seattle, Andy Wickline out in upstate New York, myself, a couple of Will Kurtz, who's written a lot on business he runs Ortho Founders, all this stuff, and sit down and say, let's just get together with a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Like, what did you ask yourself in practice? Because I'll tell you a story. I was been in 4 practice iterations. My first 5 years, I worked for Kaiser Permanente.
Okay.
About having everything done for you. My second 5 years, I worked in a multi-specialty orthopedic group and became the managing partner.
Okay.
And my next 7 years was in first 5 years of that was solo practice, and then I had a sports person, and then I became a chairman of a hospital. So I've been in 4 practice iterations that are all different.
Very different.
But when I went into solo practice and I left the big group, I didn't even know at all how to put in a bill.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I went in with one of the secretaries from my old practice, and we sat down, and she didn't know how to put in a bill. We didn't know how to put in a bill. We didn't know about electronic data exchange and
right.
stuff like that. So just something like we weren't going to eat if we didn't figure out.
Yeah.
So what I did was I got a biller coder from my old practice who was disgruntled, and I hired that person even though I didn't have any money.
Yeah, exactly.
Why? Because I can't get money to pay
without that person.
And they don't tell you that. No. That was painful. And I was already in practice for 10 years, and I didn't know how to put in a bill.
Exactly. I mean, those are the things that are so valuable, that are so experiential in some ways. Nobody wakes up as a fourth year resident and says, oh, I wonder how to bill for a surgery. They
Right.
just don't. But it's, even if it doesn't affect you specifically, having the knowledge and understanding of how the system works, Ira, I gotta say, I think the other aspect of this that hasn't been touched on is, if we don't as a group start to figure more of this out, we are going to be on the menu. I mean,
Yes.
everybody around us is taking advantage of some aspect of this to a certain extent,
Yeah.
not maliciously, but just that's the way things have evolved. And the more we can understand economics, work-life balance, practice setting, mental health, whatever bucket of this that you want to draw in, the better we can manage it, take care of each other, educate our residents, but also just protect ourselves a little bit from everybody else that's trying to, kind of take a pound of flesh.
I actually was talking to some, I have a summer fellowship for some college students, and I was talking to them about the idea that if and when hospitals become big enough, they also become insurers.
Mm-hmm.
I actually find that encouraging for the doctors, because the doctors will have a seat at the table. Right now, with the insurance companies, the doctors don't have a seat at the table.
Absolutely. And you don't, not only do you not have a seat at the table, but the economics are totally malaligned. Like, they're dissociated in every capacity. The insurance company gets a bucket of cash that they give the hospital. The hospital takes said bucket of cash, somehow figures out some rate for you or some chunk for you to get. What you use in the operating room, implant wise, all that kind of stuff in a hospital setting isn't tied to what's going on. And nobody really knows what anyone else is doing. There's no transparency. So you're all kind of running in different directions. And then when you become the insurance company and you become the care delivery arm, and there's, what really happens, because that's the system I work in now, you get more transparency. And when you get more transparency, you can do a better job taking care of patients. You can do a better job being a steward. And you, like you said, you get more input and a seat at the table. Now, it's not the only setting that works, but I think it is a unique setting because you get to see both sides, behind the curtain, which is refreshing.
I'm going to push the envelope a little bit in two questions. Do you think there's a role or a responsibility or a role of the orthopedic industry, the device industry specifically, in leading the way in these types of courses? I mean, I say this because, you'll go to sports medicine company X and they'll have 1 million cadaver labs on how to put in their stuff. It costs a lot of money.
Yep.
And we're learning how to put in yet another swivel lock or something. But I like to say yet another swivel lock. My attendants, a couple of them are on here, know that I do have minimum respect for sports medicine. It's okay. But where does industry have an incentive to have more doctors who are more savvy? Because they do have a relationship with the doctors, which is good frequently.
Right.
And there's, where is industry I'm talking about the Zimmers, the Zimmer Biomets, the Strikers, the Smith and Nephew, the Johnson Johnson, in literally education courses on this. Do you think that is an idea, or is it too close? Is there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think industry has benefited tremendously from their relationship with physicians, the physician innovation, historically, the close relationships with physicians, and then that's shifted, over the last 25 years probably. The Sunshine website is a fascinating place. If you ever can't sleep, you can pull up names and see incredible things.
It is absolutely. Yeah.
But in large part, that doesn't exist for the young 0 to 10 year surgeon like it was before. And so I think what's happening is that physicians are, whether you own your own facility and you're paying the bills for the same day surgery, just like a hospital does, but it's coming out of your pocket, the implant costs, or you're getting pressured because people are monitoring and watching what's going on. I actually think the opportunity for physicians and industry is to take back some of the leverage that we've given away. So this, now we're just going to get super controversial. I'm like a huge proponent of generic implants. I think the idea that we put in, this, highly leveraged financial machine, branded implants on every single thing is just as insane if we made all of our patients buy, name brand medications over the counter,
Right.
like with no evidence to support it. And I actually think that's where physicians, is it the implant that's making the patient better, or is it you putting in the implant that's making the patient better? And I think we've given too much credence to, like, to your point, the latest generation of the swivel lock, or
Right.
or the newest medial pivot knee, or the locking carbon fiber plate, or like some, there's
Or
all these things.
some new external fixator
Exactly.
when an external, or how different are, I'll give a shout out to a company, OIC, Orthopedic Implant Company, who does basic trauma stuff, if I'm right?
Exactly.
And you got to believe a fibular plate is a fibular plate.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, it has been, right? Since this, like, if you go in the OR and ask your rep and say, I want a DC plate, like, fall out of his chair, but he'll find one. It's just a big flat piece of metal. I mean, it's been made, or a 1/3 tubular plates, like, been the same for, I don't know, since Rudy probably hammered it out in Switzerland.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally
So
agree.
it's an interesting thing. One of the things, and I'll leave this as kind of the last question. Why do you think surgeons, specifically, of course, our field, orthopedic surgeons, don't spend their money investing in this system-based practice education? Okay, because they will spend their money to maybe visit and travel someone else to see how to do something. They'll
Yep.
spend the money to go to a bunch of meetings to learn something.
Yep.
Or they'll, be flown in by a company into Naples or somewhere for the next swivel lock, or
Right.
something of that
Right.
nature, which is good. But investing in system-based practice, what are the barriers, you think, to that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating concept. I think, I'm just, my mind's kind of wandering now, but I'm starting to think through, like, is that almost like a destination ABC traveling fellowship kind of model that you could get put together? I mean, I think primarily the reason people don't do it is because, one, they don't know how bad their practice is, or bad their decisions are they're making around this idea of system-based practice. And I think the other challenge is that it's a complex, long-term, indirect win, financially, efficiency-wise, notoriety with publications, influence in your hospital. But it's the long play. Like, everyone's out to just figure out, how do I just do one more case tomorrow, or how do I get a robot, or how do I do an anterior hip, or how do I do some new fancy trauma procedure that I should know about, but I don't, probably. I think the barrier is there's not an easily accessible place to capture this knowledge in person, or even a person to reach out to say, how did you figure this out? I mean, I think Rothman, like, you look back at Rothman and the journey they've had, and I mean, I've only recently, gotten a connection, and like you saw it not from the beginning, but from early stages. I mean,
early stages, yeah.
Incredible what they've done. And whether you agree with everything about it or not, doesn't matter. Just what they've done is absolutely incredible. I mean, I would love to hear Dr. Picaro or somebody give a course on, how did Rothman grow up? What are the strategic decisions they made? I mean, they're far from being done. You look around at the landscape and you say, private equity, big health systems, academic settings, and Rothman. I mean, there's
it's very funny. I'll tell you an anecdote. When I was a fellow, Alex Picaro was my chief resident.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Michael Saccotti, who's the head of sports at Rothman, was my chief resident.
Yeah.
And Todd Alpert, who was the head of the Rothman Institute before Alex Picaro, and then became the surgeon-in-chief at special surgery, was my PGY4.
Jeez. Look at who's who. Holy smokes.
And who's who in a 2-year period. But Rothman is a great model. Just to give you an idea, when I took over the department at Bronx Care, I took a trip down to Philadelphia. And I had a long lunch, like an extended lunch with Dick Rothman and Mike West.
Well,
It's the legendary CEO,
yeah.
Rothman.
Well,
And I said, what do I do?
yeah. Yeah.
And they just went in. We had like, it was like a 2.5 hour lunch. I
Awesome.
felt I was getting like, this was intense electroshock therapy,
It was like a fellowship. It was like a little mini fellowship, right? I mean,
I still remember Mike West saying, first thing, own your call center. And I said, what's a call center? But you're right. There may not be a target place for it to happen, or maybe there's an opportunity for some business schools
absolutely
to do this,
Absolutely.
or industry to have standing places where they bring in professors from business schools, or from Rothman,
right,
or from Ortho Carolina, another very successful group, or
exactly.
Illinois Bone and Joint, which come to mind.
Absolutely.
And bring these people in and say, this is what you do.
Yeah. And I think, in that setting, you could have such an eclectic group. You could have people from Intermountain Healthcare. You could have people from Kaiser. You can have private groups. You could have Roy Sanders fly up. You could have, just people that have done it different ways. And it would, man, I would pay to go to that. Like, holy smokes, sit there and then add some business folks in. That would be incredible.
Right. It's an interesting idea to identify all the people and say, what can you contribute to this? Can you add, like we said, like before, if we can make a series of 500 questions.
Yeah.
And Roy Sanders will answer 5 of them. Alex Carroll would answer 406 of them. Or something of that nature. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And that alone could be sort of a living wiki thing. Maybe that's the next project of JOEI.
There you go. I like it.
The top 100 questions in system-based practice answered by these 9 people.
I love it. That'd be awesome.
That would be good. So I think you have some final thoughts, or
yeah, I think one, just for the young folks that are out there, whether you're a resident or attending, just like Ira mentioned, ask questions. Don't be afraid, but B, don't be complacent that it just works and it's okay, because sometimes someday you might not be in that setting and you might have to figure some stuff out on your own, and it's going to be really valuable if you understand a little bit more of the context and the background of what's going on. And then 2, I think, look for that young partner if you're in practice, or look for that, young resident if you're a fellow or junior, and just reach back and try to bring them along. Even if they're not asking the right questions, try to take some amount of knowledge that you have in this space and pay it forward a little bit. And I think if we all do that, it'd be a good jump start.
Yeah, great. I have to ask you, what resort are you in? It looks absolutely beautiful behind you.
It's called Fairmont. It's Fairmont Hot Springs. It's like an old historic resort. It's I've been coming here since I was a young pup, and my whole family's here, so we're having a great time.
That's great, and I really want to thank you so much and appreciate you taking the time on your vacation. The article, as I mentioned, you go to JOEI and you look up Brian Cunningham's name. You'll see that he did 2 other articles for the journal, which all of them are very popular. A great trauma surgeon, great administrator, and a great colleague. I want to thank you very much for tonight.
You bet. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great opportunity to come and interact.
All right. If there's no other questions, no other last-minute questions, I think we'll call it a night. And enjoy your family. Enjoy Bozeman.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.